From the Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek studio, PBS Kansas presents Ageless Enthusiasm. On this episode of Ageless Enthusiasm, I speak with Coach Mark Potter and his wife Nanette to find out how his journey through depression set them both on a different path.
Make the decision that it's okay not to be okay and that you have to go get help if you're going to take care of the problem.
I also speak with the director of the Mental Health Association to find out the difference between mental illness and mental issues.
That's really important because I think so many people choose not to seek help oftentimes because they think, well, this is clearly not a mental illness, so I must be fine.
All this coming up on this episode of Ageless Enthusiasm. Welcome. I'm Mindy East, and this is Ageless Enthusiasm. I'm joined today by Coach Mark Potter and his wife Nanette. And welcome, guys. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate being
here.
We match. We do. I know. I got the memo.
I love all this. Well, Mark, I know you. You are a speaker. You are a former coach, 5 times, Conference Coach of the Year. You're also an inductee of the Sports Hall of Fame, right?
That's correct.
And you and Nanette have a long-time marriage. Tell us a little bit about how you met back in junior high.
I was a 7th grader. She was an 8th grader. Oh. And we were in band. And somehow or another, the instructor must have felt sorry for her because she was first chair and I was second chair. But the point being is that we were sitting beside each other.
And what'd you play?
The clarinet.
Oh, how about that?
So yeah, I mean, my sister-in-law had a clarinet and we couldn't afford one, so she gave me the clarinet and that's why I played it. So anyway, that's how we met, was in 7th and 8th grade, and I started calling her when I was a 7th grader, and here we are almost 50 years later, not quite that.
He was a tiny bit shorter than I was, just a little bit at that time. Now, he grew a lot that one summer, so then he was really super cute after that.
Well, he's super cute now, but that's what I remember hearing you say when you were speaking at an event. At one time, he was shorter than you.
He was.
Which is so funny.
He was 5'4", and I was about 5'5", and I thought, yep, he's pretty cute. So there we go. The rest is history.
There you go. Well, the reason you're here today is because you have been on quite a journey through a challenge with mental illness, depression. You had some suicidal thoughts. I want you to take our audience through that a little bit. And obviously you're here today. You've done some great things. But Nanette, you were saying when this was diagnosed, it was at the 4 to 5 point as far as seriousness.
We waited way too long. I should have gotten help way sooner than I did. If you can say way sooner, is that a word? But we should have gone forward much sooner to get help. But it took me a long time to figure out that this was the gravity of the situation and how bad it actually was. When basketball season started, he was always a little stressed out. He always lost a few pounds because he didn't come home to eat.
Just busy.
Life was going on, so it took me
always
a while to figure out how actually bad it was, and he was also trying to cover it up so I wouldn't know how bad it was.
So Mark, take us back to that point.
It was 17 years ago, and it was the beginning of the basketball season, and I started to struggle.
You were at Newman.
I was at Newman University. I coached there I was the head coach for 19 years there, and I don't know, I had been there for probably 7 or 8 years at the time, and this particular season was different. I mean, we started practice, and I started to have really thoughts that I'd never had in my entire life. Anxiety was extremely high. Anxiety always affected me when I coached, and I was a head coach for 30 years total. But this particular season, it was a lot worse, and that anxiety led into the severe depression, and the stigma really affected how I went about my business because, I was not going to tell, my assistant coaches or my athletic director, I'm the head coach, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm supposed to be the one that's in charge.
And looked up to.
And all of those things. And obviously, as I was starting to spiral out of control with my thoughts and severe depression started to take over, it was a struggle to say the least. And, the stigma was so strong that I was trying to hide it from her as well. And so I, therefore, put myself in a position where it was almost too late. And that was where the suicidal thoughts started to come in. And, I started to feel like there was a cloud over my head that I couldn't get rid of. And
looking back, was there some pivotal moment that was different? You said you'd never experienced anything to that severity. What was different?
I don't know that I can answer that question other than, I was 41 years old at the time, and I had been a head coach for a long time. So throughout all of the seasons that I coached, I would always go on about 4 hours of sleep a night throughout the course of a season. And so, you add that up through about 18 or 19 years, and it's really going to affect you in a negative way. And I just think it was an accumulation of a lot of that, maybe the expectations that I had upon myself to, I'm a Newman alum, so it was really important for me to keep that program at a high level. And we had a whole lot of success prior to that. And so I think that just kind of built as well. And then next thing you know, you find yourself in the middle of a crisis and not really knowing what to do about it. And trying to figure out, what do I do? Who do I tell? How do I go about this? And that's why we do what we do today, is so that we can truly, let people know that there is hope, and that, don't wait around. Please speak up, when you are struggling with some type of mental health issue.
So Nanette, you got a phone call at work, is that right?
He called me at work one day, and this was very unusual. I was teaching second grade, and I ran to the back of the room, and it was Mark, and he said, honey, I'm crying and I can't come out of my office. You need to come and get me right now because I can't walk out. And I had him repeat that. I said, what? What are you saying to me? And he said, you have to come right now. And so after that, I didn't end up having to leave school. He did leave the office and he went out and did his job. But after that point, I was very in tune with the fact that we were on a big struggle here that wasn't going to get better if we didn't do something about it.
Right. Who determined a trip to the doctor was the first order of business?
That's an interesting question. Let's put it this way. My wife, once Nanette recognized that I was struggling at a level I'd never struggled at before, I guess I could say, you put your foot down. She demanded, she set up the appointment, and she said, we are going to the doctor. And even after all the struggles that I'd gone through, I was still like, no, I'm not going to the doctor, and you can't make me go to the doctor. And that's where a lot of people are when they are struggling with a mental health issue, is that they, just either they deny the fact that maybe it's that serious, or the stigma is telling them that's weak and I should not have to go to the doctor to fix this problem. And that's something that I think for generations, obviously we've done that as a society, and it's we hope that through this interview today we can at least let people know that it's okay not to be okay, but what's not okay is not to do something about it.
Right. So you took the initiative, but Mark, you had to be willing to be willing. Was that difficult? It
was very difficult, because my first thoughts were, somebody's going to see me at the doctor's office. We went to see a counselor, and again, that stigma just says, what if somebody does see me in the position that I'm in? And I think that's the part that most people in our society are very similar to us in regards to, whether you're a head coach or whether you're, a college student or a high school student, middle school student, or a teacher or administrator, whatever it is that you do, depression does not discriminate. It does not care who you are, and it does not care where you come from. So once we recognize that, then it's much easier to make the decision to try to go get help and to get back to where, the best version of yourself, so to speak.
Sure. And you determined, or the doctor did, that it was a chemical imbalance?
It was a chemical imbalance. And obviously the stress that, being a head basketball coach, there's a lot of stress that goes with that, like many other jobs. But finally, at some point, and when we speak, we always tell people that, you cannot predict when that serotonin level may drop to a point in which your thoughts do start to change, and severe depression starts to really affect how you go about your business and what you're thinking about every day. So the prediction of mental illness, we try to predict it, and I think that's the most important thing for people can take away is that if you're struggling a little bit, instead of trying to take it into your own hands, get to the doctor and let them know what's going on. Let your spouse know what's happening so that maybe you can't help yourself, but they can help you.
Nanette, you've commented that people came to you and said, I'm surprised you stayed, but that never occurred to you to bail out.
It never occurred to me. When we spoke at a school, and one lady came up to me afterwards and she said, I'm so amazed that you stayed through this crisis in your marriage, that you went through this ordeal. And I guess it never occurred to me that to leave, it just occurred to me to help. And that's what I feel like God put me in the spot for. And so I want to make sure I embraced that moment, and I stepped up to that situation and helped. When I finally realized that he wasn't able to take the steps on his own, then I knew I had to do something about it.
So what would your encouragement be to other people who have a spouse or a partner that's going through this difficult time?
I think that, first of all, you shouldn't wait until we were at the spot we were in, where we waited until he was struggling with suicidal thoughts, where he was crying all the time and he wasn't able to really complete his job. It was impacting both of our jobs. I shouldn't have waited that long. I should have stepped in a lot sooner.
So you noticed some little changes at home, other than the weight loss and maybe the anxiety. What else did you pick up on?
He was sleeping a lot more. He did not want to get up in the morning.
Low energy.
All of those things. The tears, crying a lot. And he did not.
Huge.
On a regular basis, Mark doesn't sit around and cry. But at this time, he really did sit around and cry. He tried to hide that for a while, but I would catch glimpses of it until it got so bad that it was almost constant.
And so then did you go to him and have a conversation and say, honey, what's going on?
I asked multiple times what was going on.
But he always said,
I'm fine. I'm a little more emotional than I was last week. I think I'm better now. I think I can handle it. Well, he wasn't handling it. And so that's when we finally, there was a pivotal point that I decided he can't help himself. And it kind of an aha for me was, if he was having a heart attack, I would have jumped in. And if he was having a stroke, I would have jumped in. And yet I was in this crisis of life and death as well, with severe depression and anxiety and overwhelming thoughts, and I was doing nothing. So I decided that it was time. So
that's a very good point. Because as a spouse, we sometimes sit back and want them to take the lead because they know their body, they know, their thoughts and everything. But you're saying you should have just, been a little more forceful.
I should have earlier. I was forceful when it came time to actually go.
Believe me, she was forceful.
And I think I'm going to go back a moment. You asked what I would recommend to other spouses. And what I think that I recommend this all the time. I'm very, very fortunate that Mark was willing and that I had backup, because I always say I know a lot of really large men because Mark was a coach for a long time. And his assistant coach was a large man, and I figured he could put Mark in the car if I needed him to do that. If you don't have those resources, then I think that if you can't get your spouse to get help, then I say go get help for yourself. Because what I needed was strategies to help me figure out what to do next. And so I try to get spouses to step out and help themselves, and then seek resources for themselves that therefore then could help their spouse.
I think the point that we would love to get across to the audience today is to not wait around, to make the decision that it's okay not to be okay, and that you have to go get help if you're going to take care of the problem. And the consistency of continuing to take care of yourself throughout that process. So don't wait around. Get to the doctor, get to a counselor. Most importantly, tell somebody. And then I guess my final point that I would love to make is our generations have really struggled with speaking about this topic openly and honestly. And so we believe that's where we have all failed, is that, our children and our grandchildren need to know that we struggle, and it's okay that they know that we struggle, so that when they start to struggle, they will know that it's okay to get something done and to do something about it, rather than suffer in silence and then continue the path where we've really been going for generation after generation.
And get help if you need it.
Absolutely.
Whether that is counseling, medication,
That's right.
or just, some therapy or time away. Just
That's
do
right.
something. Well, we're going to take a quick little break and hear from someone else in the mental health profession, and we'll be right back. And now we're going to hear from an expert in the Mental Health Association field. Eric Litweiler is my guest. Hi, Eric.
Good to see you again.
Thank you for joining me
Well,
today.
it's my pleasure.
My big question for you and for the audience, can you please clarify the difference between a mental illness and mental issues?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you're recognizing there is a difference. That's really important, because I think so many people choose not to seek help oftentimes because they think, well, this is clearly not a mental illness, so I must be fine. I always make the analogy of about 12 years ago when I was moving to Kansas, and I was going through a divorce, starting a new job, and moving to a new state all at the same time. Statistically, these are the three biggest stressors that are faced by American adults,
Right.
and all three were happening at the same time.
Yeah.
But
Trifecta.
yeah, exactly. It really was. But the thing is, none of those three things are mental illnesses. They're all things that are happening to me. And certainly with the benefit of hindsight, it would have been very wise of me to seek professional help at that time. But none of them are mental illnesses.
Is that because they had a beginning, a middle, and an end?
By and large, yeah. That is really one good
More
distinction.
circumstantial.
Exactly.
Circumstantial.
Exactly right. What I refer to them as situational. But yes, same thing. Generally speaking, mental illnesses are not situational, whereas mental health issues are.
Okay.
And the reason that's kind of important to remember is because no one is going to fault a human being for being very sad for weeks, months at a time if you lose a loved one or go through a divorce or whatever it might be. It would be perfectly reasonable for someone going through a situation like that to take a leave of absence from work for a while, or maybe a day or two without hardly eating anything. That's perfectly normal. And no one would say, hey, you need to get your act together. It's been 3 days, your dad's dead, get over it. If instead of your father or your mother, it's your pet goldfish, and instead of 3 days, it's been 2 years, and you're still blaming, well, my pet goldfish died 2 years ago, no wonder I can't get out of bed. No, I think at that point we've crossed that line. So really what we're thinking about is your behavior normal for you? I'm not saying normal, I'm saying normal for you. And secondarily, are you able to perform the normal tasks of daily living? In other words, can you get out of bed? Can you feed yourself,
Take a
bathe
shower.
yourself,
Yeah.
maintain employment, maintain social relationships? So those are, and the problem is, those are gray areas. What's perfectly fine today may be a little out of line a week from now. So there's no hard and fast definition, but those two things are kind of the criteria that we look at.
Let me ask you, if you are a spouse or a partner of someone, and you think they are showing some signs, what's the best way to approach them?
So probably in a situation like that, one of the things I always recommend is MHA has an online screening tool on our website. It's part of a national nonprofit. And there's a screening tool for anxiety, there's one for depression, there's one for eating disorders, one for PTSD, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe encourage your loved one to go on that screening tool. They can do that from the privacy of their own home, their own office, answer a few questions, and they're kind of an always, sometimes, rarely, never sort of a format. Sometimes that objectivity from a screening tool, rather than a loved one saying, hey, you need help, sometimes that objectivity means something to a person.
A little more neutral, not as threatening.
But certainly also, encourage them to see someone. We're really big proponents at MHA of doing something called the annual mental health checkup. We call it the checkup from the neck up, which I love. But, it's just, you're getting an annual physical. You're seeing your doctor on an annual basis. Go see a therapist for an hour on an annual basis too. And if everything is fine, then you know that. But if everything's not fine, then you know that too. And oftentimes the most common mental health concerns are also the most treatable. Depression, anxiety, both very, very common in Wichita, but also very treatable. Of course, the sooner you catch them, the better. So if you're doing this on an annual basis anyway, we've caught them early. We're seeing some signs that maybe there's an anxiety disorder here. Let's start talking about that on a regular basis rather than waiting a whole nother year. By catching it early, you run a better chance of treatment.
So Eric, you mentioned Wichita.
Yeah.
Do those statistics range out all over? Is that a
They
general?
do, yeah. Depression, anxiety, those two families of disorder are really by far the most common in the United States. Now, granted, each of those families have numerous disorders underneath them. So in depression, you might have major depression, you might have seasonal depression, you might have postpartum depression, but those families of disorders are by far the most common throughout the United States, absolutely.
So what is your suggestion to someone who's feeling that way at this moment?
The problem is, it's easy for me to say, if you realize you're feeling that way, get help. But oftentimes people don't really realize this is
They're at that
happening.
point.
Yeah. Their brain is not in a place where they can objectively say, here's the problem, here's the solution, even if they know the solution. We really need to rely on friends, family members, loved ones, coworkers, and those people should be looking for sudden and drastic behavioral changes. Inability to sleep, not speaking up in meetings when they used to. Someone who used to love their job and now they come in late, close their door for 8 hours and leave. Calling in sick, missing a lot of work. Big increases in either weight gain, weight loss. Any kind of sudden drastic, and that's why I said normal for them earlier. Look for signs of, here's what they used to be 2 months ago, here's how they are today. Sudden drastic behavioral changes, acting in ways that's not normal for them.
So,
those are things we should look for.
So be aware,
Yeah,
listen, ask questions,
absolutely.
and be there to love them.
Those are absolutely great bullet points.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, thank you, Eric. I appreciate your time today.
My pleasure.
And best wishes to the Mental Health Association for continued success.
I appreciate it, Mindy.
So we're back now again with Mark and Nanette Potter. And Mark, tell us a little bit of your overview. You created an entirely new business, almost a foundation, D2 Up, dedicated to uncommon principles. Tell us a little bit about your work in the community and nationwide.
One day I came home and I told my wife, I said, Nanette, we've got to change what we're doing. We got to get out of coaching, you got to get out of teaching, and we need to do something to impact in a much different way. And so I said, we need to travel the world, and whoever will listen to us, we need to speak openly about this topic. And so from that point, which she did not agree with it in the beginning, from that point, she's the creative one, I'm not. Anybody that knows us will know that. She developed the D2 Up. It is our speaking business, and it is what has really taken us to 22 different states now to speak to colleges, universities, community colleges, high schools, middle schools, all different types of businesses. In regards to mental health, we also speak on 3 other topics, which involves mental toughness and strategies that deal with things that you can do to perform better under pressure as well. So we have the opportunity to really impact in a much different way now.
So you've taken a bad thing and turned it into a positive by giving people a hope and a future, for them to know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel and it's not an oncoming train.
It's not. There is hope and there is strength in getting help. It is not a weakness, and we like to tell everyone that. And we just embrace the opportunity to go out and speak to people and give them hope, let them know that depression and anxiety, while there are lots of people that deal with that, there's hope and there is help out there, and we would walk alongside of those people and help them out. So,
and you can recover.
You can.
And you can
Absolutely.
go on and have a wonderful life. Thank you so much for being my guest today, and we wish you the very best on continued success.
Thanks,
Thank
Mindy. We
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us on Ageless Enthusiasm. I'm Mindy East, and we'll see you next time.